Welcome back to Akhara Study. Today, we're opening up Chapter 1 of our literature series to examine a story called The Wind Cap. We start by meeting John. He is a young boy raised entirely on a farm, surrounded by dirt, plows, and crops. But his mind is somewhere else entirely. Smell the soil and read the seasons, but he doesn't know the first thing about surviving the ocean. While working the fields, John spots a tiny green turtle sitting on a clod of dirt. To keep it safe from his plow, he gently picks it up and rests it right on top of his head. When he finishes his chores and takes the turtle down, it's completely transformed. The creature has turned into a tiny green ferryman, bowing in the palm of John's hand. Grateful for being kept safe, the fairy offers John a reward. He promises to grant whatever John's heart desires most. John has spent his whole life anchored to the dirt. Now he's abruptly handed the magical means to achieve a life he has zero practical experience with. The fairy reads John's mind and gives him exactly what a sailor needs most: wind. He hands over a striped cap that can summon a breeze on command. Looking at the text here, we see the fairy's explicit warning. There is one rigid condition attached to this magic. Absolutely no human hand will ever be able to take the cap off. John runs off to the sea, gets a spot on a ship, and quickly proves his worth. By simply twisting the cap on his head, he can summon the east wind, the west wind, and everything in between. Because he can control the weather, John becomes an incredibly valuable asset to the crew. But his value quickly becomes a trap. The captain realizes how useful John is and refuses to let him step foot on land ever again. A year and a day pass. John doesn't touch solid ground once during that entire time, and his desire to see his farm grows into a constant, intense ache. The very tool that allowed him to escape the farm and sail the ocean has locked him in. He is entirely cut off from his roots, turning his dream life into a prison. One quiet afternoon, John falls asleep below deck. His homesickness spills over into an intensely vivid dream about the seasons changing rapidly back on his farm. As the dream plays out, John tosses and turns in his sleep. He ends up twisting the cap round and round on his head, inadvertently calling down a massive, uncontrolled squall from a clear sky. The wind violently tears the sails and snaps the rigging. Panicking sailors try to rip the cap off John's head, but the fairy's rule holds. Human hands are completely useless against the magic barrier. The squall turns into a full-blown storm. The captain, completely enraged, drags John onto the deck, grabs him by the tail of the cap, spins him around, and throws him directly into the roaring ocean. A magical object with zero flexibility cannot handle complex human feelings. John pushed his longing for the land down for too long, and when it finally surfaced in his sleep, it weaponized the cap and nearly destroyed the entire crew. But hitting the water triggers a loophole. Going under the waves physically washes the cap right off John's head. Because no human hands were involved, the magic breaks perfectly, and the storm instantly dies down. John swims safely to shore. He retrieves the cap, heads straight for his farm, and tucks it safely under a heavy stone, where he knows the ferryman will eventually find it. He goes back to his life in the fields. But when winter arrives and heavy snow covers the ground, that old, familiar urge to sail returns. He finally stops trying to completely suppress one side of himself to satisfy the other. John decides to split his life straight down the middle. 6 months on the water, 6 months working the dirt. This rhythm works. Over time, he becomes highly successful, eventually owning his own boat and 100 acres of farmland. He earns the nickname Captain Turtle because he is equally at home on the land and in the sea. Denying a core part of your identity usually leads to disaster, just like it did on the ship. John only found real success when he stopped treating his dreams and his roots as a forced choice and built a disciplined life that honored both. If you want to explore more stories that break down the balance between ambition and reality, hit the subscribe button and join us for the next.